Howdy ho, pedestrians. What am I working on today? You will never guess what I'm working on. Oh, I guess you did. It's another landscape. Well, that is quite true. I am working on another landscape here, and just to give you the down low, I'm using Claussen Linen to paint on a bunch of different colors. And I also put down the image down the bottom right-hand corner so that you can kind of see what the guide is that I'm looking at. And I do this in two different layers. So the first layer is my block in. You can see that I put some umber into the back there. And I'm using a palette knife because the brushes just weren't getting enough paint on the canvas for my liking. And I like the texture that the palette knife gives me. So here are my colors. I have King Blue in the top left, Lead White, Naples Yellow, Cad Yellow Light, Vermillion, Perylene Red, Ultramarine Blue, Sap Green, Transparent Oxide, Yellow Transparent Oxide, Red, and Raw Umber. So those are the colors that I'm using as I'm coming in to block in this painting. And you can see that down in the left-hand corner is supposed to be water. So you're like, why would you use purple for water? Well, because that's the color that I'm seeing underneath the superficial portion of the water. And as it gets closer to the horizon, it gets a little bit more blue and lighter in value. So I'm using the King Blue to kind of make that lighter in value closer to the horizon. And is the shadow shape of these rocks really that dark? No, it's not that dark. But I'm really trying to push the values so that I can see how light I can go or how dark I can go with the colors that I currently have. And to tell you the truth, sometimes I really have a hard time seeing the right value and the right color in my paintings. But I've learned to accept that. I've learned to use it as a strength and say, well, how do I want this painting to look? Do I want it to look airy and light? Do I want it to be heavy, dynamic? And my understanding of color and value really helps being able to manipulate those forms better. But the key thing that I like most is variety. And as you can see in those shadows, I have warms and cools that I was using to be able to paint in there. And I'm working from the foreground to the background. So here is the sky that I'm starting to block in. And this canvas is taped to a board. So it's free floating so that I can take it and stretch it onto stretcher bars or mount it to a board. I'll probably just mount it to a board if I feel like it's good enough to be able to sell. Sometimes I'll do these things just for kicks and giggles and not try to sell them. But here you can see I changed my view because this is the second layer that I'm working on. And I got rid of the image because I'm going to be mixing on the palette for some of those colors. And the sky, I want it to go lighter in value because I want less contrast blocking in the dunes or the sandy part that's kind of coming down. And anyways, using King Blue, some brush strokes to be able to indicate direction, and also some raw umber to kind of kill the color of the King Blue. Raw umber is a great gray that you can add to anything, and it'll kind of settle the color down a little bit if you think it's too vibrant. And I did for this painting. I felt like the blue in the water was just a little bit too blue. So I added more umber to it to kind of warm it up, not cool it off. But now I'm going into the background onto the rocks. And the nice thing is I had a really good shape established there at the very beginning with that first layer. And now all I have to do is come in and paint those shadow shapes and a couple of highlights. And that poster study that I started out with forms mountains. It's beautiful. Love it. And now I'm coming into the sand, and I felt like it needed to be lighter in value and a little bit less steep going to the water's edge. And the greenery, is that the right? I don't know if it's greenery, but this portion that is creeping into Lake Powell that is green needed more shape manipulation. I wasn't happy with the way it was shaped initially, and so now I'm starting to refine those shapes a little bit better. And I'm using Sap Green, a little bit of Cad Yellow, some white, and then in those more gray parts, raw umber. And here are some rocks that were kind of sitting down, almost looking like they were sliding down the nice little sandy ridge. And this paintbrush that I'm currently using is a bristle brush. And I start to establish some of the transparent oxide yellow, some white, and some of the Naples yellow. And I kind of dragged it across with my paintbrush to pick up part of the texture that is sitting underneath. Same thing here in the shadows. As I'm painting in those shadows, it is a warm color, so a little bit darker value of the same color, but it's picking up the reflections. The light that's bouncing off of the sand into the shadow shape of the rocks. So it's a darker value, but pretty much the same. Now, as I painted in the cast shadows, those are a little bit more blue because the sky is being reflected into that part of the rock, not the sand. So you'll get this blue cast shadow instead of this orange cast shadow. And all of these brush strokes that I'm putting on there right now for these rocks, because I want them nicely detailed, I'm just like softly dragging the paint across the canvas because I want texture and I want things to kind of come out, stick out. Hard edges will stick out. I'll manipulate forms and soften out some edges. I want to put in a couple of highlights, lighter values that are catching more of that sunlight that's coming in. And then I come in with a darker value for those shadows, those deep shadows between the reflected light and the shadow shape. And I remember when I was working on this, I was having a hard time with that nice little shadow that's sitting off in the top right of the rocks. And it was the wrong color, wrong value. So I went in a couple of times and painted in the violet and then also the reflected light. And I also wanted to refine some of those cores. Coming back into the painting of the rocks, some of the forms I really wanted to push a little bit more. So I got a darker value. I put a lighter value at the top ridge that is kind of turning towards the sky, and then stippled in some darker values to kind of give the effect that it is a cast shadow from little rocks that are sitting on the top there. And the foreground here, just trying to finish off, I wanted to throw a lot of paint on there. So I took a nice sable type brush, a big one, and just threw paint on there. And that's between Naples yellow, yellow ochre, transparent yellow oxide, and white. And I wanted it a lighter value closer to the rocks and then to get darker as it came towards the viewer. So it kind of turned in the form. And here I put in some darker values. And I'm painting directly into it, but now you can see the textures. I want to push that little island out a little bit more and increase some of the textures on the top of the rock set so that it looked more interesting. And here's the final view of it. But anyways, I hope that this information was beneficial. If not, I'm sorry, that just sucks. But if so, that's great. I hope you can apply it into your own work. So hopefully you'll have a great day and do some landscape painting. All right, I'll catch you on the next one.